I didn't say a word when the HOA president screamed that I'd damaged community property. I just climbed down from my tractor, pulled the folded plat map from my pocket, and handed it to the responding officer. He stared at it for a few seconds, then turned toward her. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "this tractor is on private farmland. It's not HOA property." Her mouth opened, then closed again. I could almost hear her ego cracking under the weight of that silence. That piece of paper wasn't just a pit, was proof that everything she'd tried to take from me never belonged to her in the first place. I'd bought the land 2 years earlier, after my dad passed. 120 acres of quiet, open farmland, the kind of place where you can hear the wind before you hear the highway. I didn't move there for trouble. I moved there to breathe again, to work the soil, to rebuild what my family had started decades before. Life was peaceful. Mornings smelled like coffee and wet grass. Evenings ended with the hum of crickets and the golden light on the corn rows. My only real neighbors were deer and the occasional delivery truck. Then a developer built a subdivision next door. At first, I didn't mind. People have a right to homes. The place was called Harvest Ridge, which made me laugh at sad. Right on land that used to grow corn. But soon enough, a homeowners association popped up, and peace was gone. The first sign of trouble showed up taped to my mailbox. Notice of violation, unapproved agricultural equipment. Apparently, the sight of my parked tractor violated the community aesthetic standards. I remember reading it twice, thinking it had to be a joke. The tractor was on my land, a few feet from the gravel easement, separating my property from theirs. I called the number listed and got the HOA president, Karen Whitaker. She sounded sweet until she realized I wasn't one of her residents. "Well," she said, "the tractor is visible from our neighborhood. Our bylaws require all visible machinery to be approved by the HOA board." I told her calmly that her bylaws stopped at her property line. She didn't like that answer. "We'll see about that," she said before hanging up. That's when the harassment began. Within weeks, I started getting letters about noise complaints from harvest equipment during daylight hours. They said my irrigation pump was a nuisance and that my fertilizer threatened property values. One even accused me of industrial activity within residential sectors. I tried being polite. I called. I sent emails with deed copies and maps proving the land was mine. The HOA ignored every one. Then came the day Karen hid my tractor. I was operating near the shed gravel road, pulling a grain cart. She was standing on the curb, waving her arms, shouting something about unauthorized farming. Then she climbed into her SUV, reversed too fast, and slammed into my loader. The metal crunched. She jumped out, clutching her neck, screaming that I'd rammed her car end, immediately called 911. The officer showed up, inspected the scene, and realized the impact was from her bumper, not my tractor. He let me go, but filed a report. 2 days later, I got a certified letter from the HOA, fining me $1,500 for damaging community property. That was the day I stopped talking and started researching. Every night after that, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by county plat maps and dusty deed records. My father had taught me one thing about land. It remembers who really owns it. I found it buried in a 1978 county record, a permanent agricultural easement that ran straight through the edge of their subdivision. The HOA's so-called greenbelt was legally my access route, written into the deed before their development even existed. And the kicker? Their stormwater system connected to my irrigation drainage. That meant their lawns depended on infrastructure I legally controlled. If they blocked me, they'd be violating county code. I gathered every piece of evidence, surveys, maps, copies of the easement. I started logging every letter and every threat they sent. I wasn't angry anymore, just methodical. So when Karen called the cops again this time, accusing me of trespassing during harvest, I was ready. She stood there, red-faced, watching the officer approach. I stepped down, handed him the folder, and waited. He compared the parcel map on his tablet to the one I'd brought. Then he looked at her. "Ma'am," he said, "this is active farmland under a protected easement. He's within his rights." Her jaw actually dropped. I could have said something snarky, but silence worked better. 2 weeks later, I filed a formal agricultural obstruction complaint with the county, citing the HOA for interference with farming operations. The county issued an order requiring the HOA to remove all barriers and cease enforcement on my property. Karen went quiet after that. A month later, I showed up at their board meeting calmly, legally, to make sure the issue was closed. She was there, sitting at the front, pretending I didn't exist. I waited until the open comment session, then unrolled the full-size plat map across their table. These documents show, Primera Said evenly, that your HOA bylaws stop 50 feet before your fence line. The gravel path, the drainage, even part of your so-called green space. They're all within agricultural easement jurisdiction. You've been issuing fines on land that isn't yours. Their lawyer leaned in, read the document, and went pale. He whispered something to the board. They recessed immediately. When they came back, they rescinded the fine and promised to review HOA policies. 3 board members resigned within the month. Karen didn't at first, but when the county cited their irrigation system for illegal runoff, the same system connected to my field drain, she put her house up for sale. I didn't say a word, just waved. When the moving truck pulled out, now, 2 years later, the HOA still exists, but it's quiet. They keep their fences trimmed and their letters to themselves. The new residents sometimes buy corn from my roadside stand. Same stand the HOA once tried to ban for being unsightly. I still park my tractor near that same gravel path every harvest. No one complains anymore. They just nod or pretend not to see me. Either way, it's peaceful. Sometimes, when I start the combine in the early morning light, I think about that first phone call with Karen the way. She talked like she owned everything she could see. It's funny how people think rules and real ownership are the same thing. They're not. Paperwork, patience, and time, that's real power. Now, when I drive through, I don't hear shouting or threats, just the hum of the engine and the wind moving through the rows. Quiet, again, exactly how I like it.